who feels just completely buried under the sheer weight of information, the endless debates, the conflicting data, the impossibility of holding two complex ideas in your head at once without feeling like you're going to break, then you are exactly who we're talking to today. We're not experiencing a lack of data. We're in a crisis of, well, disciplined sense making.
Precisely. And if you're stuck in that loop of arguing the same point with different people, and they all seem to be right at the same time, you just need a different tool.
A way to manage perspective.
A way to manage perspective without ever claiming to have the absolute final truth. And that really is the mission of the Prismatic Dynamics Framework, or PD.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is a deep dive into PD. It's what? A living meta framework? The goal is to produce a coherent understanding by rigorously managing three core variables.
Right. Multiple perspectives, layered meaning, and the crucial influence of the observer.
And the output isn't certainty, it's coherence.
Exactly. We're looking for an understanding that is testable, communicable, and, structurally sound. But, and this is the key part, it's produced without pretending it's the final word. It actually embraces the idea that our understanding is temporary.
And this brings us to, I think, the most important distinction, because when people hear terms like meta framework or 12 laws, they immediately get worried.
Oh, yeah.
They think they're being sold a new philosophy or some kind of shortcut to being right all the time.
That anxiety is totally valid,
Yeah.
but it's unfounded here. PD is explicitly not a replacement for science or religion or psychology. It is not a shortcut to certainty, and it is absolutely not a belief system demanding your agreement.
So it's more like a tool.
Think of it as a specialized instrument cluster on a ship. It's a framework for navigation, not an altar for worship.
A tool set to stop complexity from leading to paralysis. I like that. But any good tool, especially a conceptual one, needs a strong foundation. And the foundation PD uses is, it's brilliant. The metaphor of optics.
Yes. Light, prism, refraction, and the observer.
Why optics?
Well, what's so fascinating about using optics is that the metaphor, just by its nature, encodes four essential truths about how meaning is formed in the human mind. It forces discipline onto abstract thought. So let's just break down those four elements, starting with the first one, light.
Light. In this system, that represents the raw information, right? The signal before we start interpreting it.
Exactly. Think of it as pure, undivided potential. It's the event itself, the raw data stream, the objective fact of an experience, or even just an internal, unarticulated sensation. The light itself is neutral.
It's just abundance without structure.
Right, and you can't really act on it directly because it holds all possible interpretations at the same time.
Okay, so if light is the pure potential, we need some kind of structure to turn that signal into something we can understand, and that is the prism.
The prism is the interpretive structure. It's the mechanism that splits that unified light into distinguishable bands, just like a physical prism splits white light into a rainbow.
And in PD, the prism is formed by the geometry we choose to apply. The so-called 12 laws, the specific lens sets we choose.
Right.
A lens set being what? Like choosing to analyze a situation strictly through an ethics lens or a trauma lens, or maybe a purely economic one?
Precisely. The prism is the specific filter you consciously apply. And the key insight here is that the prism doesn't invent the light. It just reveals a structure that was already present by applying a consistent, declared geometry.
It imposes discipline on the chaos.
It does.
But wait a minute. If I apply a lens, say a trauma lens, isn't that immediately going to bias my outcome? Doesn't that mean I'm just forcing the result I want based on the angle I chose?
That brings us perfectly to the third element, refraction. When the light passes through the prism, it inevitably gets bent. Refraction is that unavoidable bending of the beam due to a medium, and the medium is us. It's our context.
So refraction is the bias, the distortion.
I'd say it's more than just distortion. It's the mechanism of meaning formation itself. Refraction is the combined influence of language, culture, emotion, memory, identity, trauma, all of it. This is the stage where raw experience becomes meaningful.
And the framework insists this bending isn't bad. You don't try to remove it.
You can't. If you did, you'd just be back at raw, unusable light. The goal is to model it.
Okay, so you account for it.
Exactly. If you ignore refraction, you assume your interpretation is pure, objective truth. And that leads to dogma. If you model it, you understand your interpretation is conditioned by specific forces. The rigor in PD comes from trying to reason responsibly about how that meaning got formed.
Which leads right into the fourth element, the one that ties it all together, the observer. The fact that the person holding the prism is, Well, it's you.
Yes,
Yeah.
the observer is the active variable. You are never external to the system, you're part of its geometry. Observation affects the outcome not just by what you measure, but by what you ignore, how you label things, and, crucially, what you fear or expect to find.
I feel like in most frameworks, the observer is the elephant in the room, the bias you're supposed to minimize. But PD seems to treat the observer as an engine, not a bug.
It treats the observer as a first-class element of the analysis.
Mm.
The system forces you to declare your position, your values, your fears, because you never ever access pure meaning without selection and interpretation.
Intellectual honesty demands we admit we're the instrument.
Not just the measuring stick.
Exactly.
That distinction changes everything.
Huh.
Okay, so we've defined the optics. But once the light is split into all these bands of meaning, our minds tend to let them fly apart into chaos. How does PD bring coherence back?
That's where we need boundaries and maps. And that starts with the concept of scope.
Scope, which you've called the overlooked engine of misunderstanding.
It really is. Most people fight about facts when they're actually arguing about relevance.
Relevance meaning how far we zoom in or out on an issue.
Exactly. Scope is the boundary condition of meaning. It defines the time frame, the stakeholders, the causal layers that matter. It's like the zoom function on your phone's camera.
I like that. So microscope is the tight crop, the specific interaction right in front of me.
Correct. Meso is the small group, patterns over weeks or months, the community shot. Macro is the system, the long-term trend, the satellite view. And then meta is the furthest zoom out. It questions the language we're using, how we even know what we know.
So two people can be operating on facts, be totally correct in their own zoom level, and still disagree completely because they're not in the same scope.
It happens all the time. One person's arguing at the micro level, he was rude to me today, and the other is at the macro level. The system has conditioned that behavior for decades. They're both right, but they're not having the same conversation.
So PD mandates you have to declare your scope before you declare your conclusion.
You must. It instantly calms the argument down by just clarifying the boundaries.
Okay, we set the boundaries with scope. Now we need a map for all those different refracted views. That's the prismatic web.
If the prism splits the light, the web is the relational map that keeps all that resulting meaning connected and coherent. It's just nodes and links. Nodes are concepts, claims, feelings. Links are the relationships between them. Support, conflict, dependency, analogy.
That sounds inherently nonlinear. I mean, it's a departure from how we usually try to solve problems. You know, A leads to B leads to C.
It's a direct challenge to linear thinking. Linear thinking forces premature conclusions. It's just terrible at handling paradox or complexity. The web structure, because it allows for feedback loops and layered interpretations, it forces you to hold both hand structures.
Instead of collapsing to a single either-or answer.
Exactly.
That prevents conceptual collapse. But I have to ask the skeptical listener a question here. If I just throw every claim and feeling onto a map and start linking them, doesn't that just become an infinite tangled mess?
It could. That's the function of what we call web hygiene. The system requires internal discipline. There are three key constraints. First is definition anchoring. Every node needs a clear boundary, a clear definition, so its meaning doesn't drift.
Okay.
Second, link typing. You can't just draw a line. You have to declare how they relate. A supports B or A contradicts C.
And the third constraint must be about the observer.
It is observer notation, recording who interpreted what, under what conditions, and using which lens. This is how the map stays stable without becoming rigid. If something changes, you check the notation. Was this interpreted by me when I was angry? Was it based on data only available at the macro scope? That rigor makes the map trustworthy.
Okay, so we have the mechanism optics, we have the boundary scope, and the map, the web. Now, what about the operational constraints that keep it all honest? The 12 laws, are these like actual commandments?
It's better to think of them as the rules of optics for meaning. They're bias correctors. They're designed to prevent the four major failure modes: premature collapse, infinite expansion, observer denial, and scope drift. They just force cognitive humility.
Can you give us a couple of examples that really show their teeth?
Sure. Take the law of observation. Attention selects reality. It's a constant reminder that what you choose to measure becomes prominent and what you ignore becomes invisible. So you have to actively search for the invisible,
Okay.
or the law of polarity and paradox. It mandates that you hold tension longer. You have to sit with contradiction until you reduce that false certainty that prevents the premature collapse into a single winner.
And I really appreciate the last one, the law of unity and mystery. The idea that coherence is reachable without total certainty. It means the unknown part is structurally acceptable.
Yes. You can achieve closure without achieving a final answer. It reinforces that cause is a network, not a single, simple reason.
This is where it gets really interesting for anyone listening, the practical application. How do you stop talking about prisms and actually use this to solve a real problem? I know PD outlines a 7-step workflow.
Right. This is the operational mechanism. It takes all these abstract concepts and turns them into a checklist. Step 1 is simple. Declare the light. Just define the raw input, what actually happened in the most neutral sentence possible.
Step 2, declare scope. Immediately set the time frame and boundaries. Last 3 days or last 3 years.
Step 3, choose your prism angles. Select, say, 3 to 5 relevant laws or lenses. For a personal problem, maybe you choose the law of refraction to acknowledge emotion and the law of observation to see what you're focusing on.
Then step 4, refract into bands. This is the core interpretation part. You consciously split the light into different perspectives. The self, the other, the system, emotional claims, hard evidence.
Step 5 is build the web. You convert all those notes into nodes and links, mapping the claims relationally. You actually visualize the tensions.
And step 6, the coherence pass. You don't force a winner. Instead, you synthesize what's solid across most bands, what changes when you shift scope, and crucially, what would falsify your current view.
And finally, step 7, communicate. You present your core statement with an explicit scope disclaimer and a clear, testable next action.
Let's make this tangible. The example the framework uses. You message a friend, they haven't replied for 10 days, you're feeling disrespected, anxious.
Okay, so the light is only this. My friend hasn't replied my message for 10 days. Notice how neutral that is?
No judgment in it.
None.
The scope is set, personal friendship, time frame is the last 2 weeks, no assumptions about external issues. We bound the investigation immediately to stop inventing stories.
Now you refract into bands. The self-emotional band is, I feel ignored, anxious, and I'm worried I did something wrong.
Okay.
The friend other band is, they may be overwhelmed, depressed, traveling without service, or just avoiding conflict because they're stressed.
And the evidence band.
The evidence band is just. The fact is only that a message was sent and no reply was received. Intent is unknown.
Now we build the web. We have a node for silence. It links to feeling ignored, a strong emotional link. But silence also links to possible overwhelm, a contradictory link. The web shows you visually that the emotional reaction is strong, but the actual evidence is thin.
And that leads to the coherence pass, the move from chaos to clarity. The synthesis is, I do not know their intent. I do know the silence is causing me emotional distress. The friend being overwhelmed and my feeling anxious are both valid nodes, but my distress is the only solid claim across all bands.
And the test is not an accusation, but an observation. Send a clear, non-accusatory message to check on them.
Right, which leads to the final communication. Hey, checking in, haven't heard back, are you okay? If you're busy, no pressure, just wanted to make sure we're good. You achieve coherence without needing to be omniscient, and your action is responsible and non-reactive.
That is PD in action. It's disciplined interpretation with a move toward clarity, not judgment. For the learner, the benefit here is that it lets you hold complexity without paralysis. It lets you relate differences without erasing them.
It succeeds because it insists on those explicit declarations of scope and observer influence. Success isn't measured by getting a definitive final answer, because that's often an illusion, but by relational coherence. How well do your different views connect into a stable, navigable map?
Which leads to a really great, final, provocative thought for you to chew on. The PD loop is recursive, right? A new understanding reshapes your prism, which alters future refractions, so the web is always evolving. If the framework doesn't aim for a final answer, how do you even define progress?
Progress in this system isn't measured by the volume of conclusions you reach. It's measured by the increasing structural coherence of the map you build. You're just getting better at seeing the range of possible connections and the limits of your own view. And that is far more valuable than simply concluding you were right all along.